Hello, and welcome to AB606, Advanced Professional and Ethical Conduct of Behavior Analysts. I am your instructor for this course, Luke and Murphy. I'm a BCBA and licensed behavior analyst in the state of Missouri, and I am sincerely and truly very happy to be an instructor for this course. This is a first for me. I have not been the instructor or adjunct for a college level course before, so I'm very excited. And part of the reason why I say that is so that you're a little bit easy on me. I'm sure I will make mistakes, and it'll be a learning experience for me. But I'm really looking forward to it and learning from you and the rest of the faculty about how to be a better instructor. So I wanted to start by introducing myself for this first lecture. Ethics is a much more subjective topic than most behavior analysts are used to studying. We're used to more of the hard science approach where it's, something is correct because the evidence says so, and very scientific methodology. Ethics, for better or worse, is more subjective, a little bit more kind of mushy in terms of what is considered accepted by the field and what isn't. Luckily, we do have the ethics code, which goes a very long way in drawing those clear lines for us, but still, there is always going to be some room for interpretation in any ethical system. So I'm going to take some time to give background on myself. I hope that will prove to be useful as the course goes on, and I share my personal experience and anecdotes with you, that knowing where I come from and where I have kind of my academic background as well as my personal background will give a little more insight into my perspective. I also hope to get some of this from you all in your forum posts, because our experience in past education always is a factor in how we approach ethical cases. So we're going to have a video lecture every week. They will be varying in length. They will almost certainly be an hour or less. So this week we're going to talk about just introducing you to the course and my perspective on ethics in the real world. So we're not going to dive into the ethical code quite yet. We're going to save code 2.0 for next week. But this week I wanted to give more of an overview. So just some, again, personal background on myself. I'm from Missouri, grew up in a very rural setting, small town called Silex, population 197. I did attend Truman State University and received my bachelor's in sociology and anthropology and a minor in linguistics. I think this is relevant because I'm very interested in some of the cultural nuances that are implied in the code and how the code can be interpreted differently by different cultural subgroups, and how we should approach clients and families and caregivers in different cultural subgroups differently. So while I was at Truman State, I volunteered at various summer camps across the country. Every summer while I was in college, I went to and worked at a different summer camp in Washington State, Wisconsin, Texas, South Carolina. Upon graduation from Truman State, I went to the University of Montana for graduate school to get a degree in intercultural youth and family development. So this took my interest in other cultures and focused it more on the social services setting. So part of that degree was a year-long internship, and I worked at Opportunity Resources, which is an organization that serves adults with developmental disabilities. I was fortunate enough to work just next to a Native American reservation, so I had a good amount of cultural diversity in that field, and also a wide range of clients, including those with high functioning autism, those that were much more severely or significantly impacted by their disability. And these people, some of these individuals lived at home with family, some lived in large institutions, some lived in small community-based group homes, but it was a nice introduction to what the field of developmental disabilities looks like in the real world. So, following graduation from the University of Montana, I spent a year traveling internationally. I spent time in Bulgaria, Turkey, Georgia, India, China, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And as I went, I stayed about a month in each place, sometimes longer, and volunteered at organizations that serve people with developmental disabilities in those countries. So most of them were residential facilities that aim to have a kind of self-sufficient community. So Turkey was an olive farm. Republic of Georgia was a wine vineyard that housed individuals who were socially vulnerable. India, again, is a Waldorf-inspired community in the rural part of Western India. So that, again, kind of my purpose was to expand my understanding of how individuals with developmental disabilities are treated and incorporated into different communities and what different models for that are. Okay, so after traveling for a while and exhausting my meager budget, I returned to the United States, moved to Austin, Texas. So in 2008, just after the financial meltdown and needed a place to land, in Austin, Texas was one of the few places that was hiring at all, much less in education. So I moved there, became certified as a special education teacher while working as a paraeducator at a large public high school. And after getting certified, which took about a semester, I spent the rest of my time there teaching in a very large, very diverse high school that had 4 multi-categorical classrooms for students with intellectual disabilities. Student population was majority minority, and 65% free and reduced lunch. I think having that be my first experience in working with these individuals who were predominantly economically disadvantaged did have a big impact on me and how I approach the field in general. So after about a year and a half, I became the lead life skills teacher there, and that just put me as a leader for the 14 paraeducators and 3 other teachers and those students in all those classes. We had about 35 students. So I designed all of our professional developments, the programming for those classrooms, how we divided up those classrooms. In the course of that, my classroom, the one that I was teaching in, became the placement for those who had physically aggressive behaviors and self-injurious behaviors. And I think because I was new and I didn't want to put somebody else in charge of that, I just took that on myself. So those who had some really significant behaviors, I took on personally. And I quickly realized that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. The best of intentions, of course, and I tried really hard and I worked, but I realized that the skills that I had learned over the years in school and in the field were not enough for these students. And they needed more, and I didn't know what to do to give it to them. So that's when I did some searching and I found the field of, although I had been somewhat familiar with ABA, I had not until that time been familiar with the BACB or the BCBA certification. So I enrolled at Florida Institute of Technology. We didn't have one that I could attend locally, but also being working full time, I needed the flexibility of an online program. And it was exactly what I was looking for. It was something that just within my first few weeks of the course, it made perfect sense. And although I didn't understand the entire field, it gave me a framework and a lens through which to view behavior, through radical behaviorism, that made perfect sense to me, and I could see how it was going to be incredibly beneficial for my students and the rest of the teachers and the program in the high school in Texas. So was able to do some professional development and share some of that, finish the courses in about a year and a half, was able to have supervision by a BCBA in the district, and I became certified in January 2013. During the year when I took the test, I moved with my wife and my newborn son to Taiwan. That gave me the flexibility to study for the exam and also do some behavior consulting and tutoring in Taiwan. It was a personal decision for us that we would want to move abroad for a year so we could spend more time with our baby and give us a little flexibility and again get that intercultural perspective that I really value. After a year in Taiwan, I moved to Columbia, Missouri, and I taught in a self-contained intensive behavior classroom for students with intellectual disabilities for a year, and then became the district autism specialist. And this is the position that I'm still in. This is my third year, and I currently support the programming for about 200 students with autism in a variety of settings. So everywhere from completely mainstreamed, just very minor impact, to those who are in a completely self-contained setting. So, despite my journey, I still find myself almost daily in situations where I don't know what I'm doing. But I think the difference is now I have a field and a professional community that I know that gives me the ability to know how to approach situations and where to find assistance. And that just cannot be underestimated. So I hope the little bit of personal information is going to be helpful for you to connect with me a little more personally and to understand where I'm coming from. Again, ethics can get personal, and I want you to understand that my perspective is just that, it's my perspective. Now, the ethical code is the ethical code, that is fixed, but I think everyone's perspective and outlook on ethics is evolving, and it's evolving based on what they've learned, what they've experienced, what they've seen. So that's why I feel that was an important part of this course. So moving on, our course overview. There is a document that is, I believe, called Course Summary in Moodle, and that is my attempt at boiling down the syllabus to its major parts and wording it in a more narrative framework. So this is just another way, really this is a very straightforward course. It's really pretty simple, as it should be for an 8-week course that is 1 credit hour. Overall, the purpose and structure of this course is to study 4 components of the ethical code. So we're going to be studying 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0. So being an 8-week course, the way the semester fell, one of those weeks is spring break. So the finals week is week 8. So that gives us 7 weeks of instruction. Since there's 4 components of the ethic code, that leaves 3 weeks where we do something kind of different, this week being one of them. So out of our 7 lecture weeks, we have 4 that are really focused on the details of the code, and 3 others that look more at the big picture. And what I hope to give you in those other 3 weeks, one of which is this week, is some perspective from the field. That's my hope. So the resources that you'll be given for the course are video lectures, obviously this being one of them. So every week I will narrate a presentation, and this is to give you my perspective and background on the ethical code and ethics in practice in the field. You also have readings. The readings, while I list Bailey and Birch here as being the main one, obviously the ethical code is your main reading. It's a short read, but it's dense. So keep in mind that obviously, while it may not be listed as a reading, it is in the syllabus. You're going to be referring directly to the ethical code on a regular basis. And when I say Bailey and Birch, they have a few topics. The one that I am referring to here is the Ethics for Behavior Analysis. This is the 3rd edition. I know that 2nd edition is probably what you started with earlier. They've made some nice upgrades in the 3rd edition, so I'm going to be referring to chapters and specific tables and things in there, so I do highly recommend that you get a copy of the 3rd edition if you don't already. So assignments, again, it's going to be pretty straightforward. You really just have one assignment, and you have the same assignment every week, and that is to participate in the forum discussion. So every week you need to post and you need to respond once. So you're going to have 2 different kinds of posts, and it's going to kind of alternate. One of them is going to be you are going to describe a situation that you've experienced in your practicum site or otherwise, that you have encountered something that was relevant to the ethical code that we're studying that week. And if you haven't, then thinking of a code or an ethical situation that you have heard of, or something relevant to your work that is also covered in the ethical code that week. And then also, the second kind of forum is going to be creating a short video summary that could be used to train others on the code. So you're going to be doing kind of what I'm doing, in that you're going to be sitting down and narrating a short video that summarizes code 2.0 and then code 3.0 and so on and so forth. And for both of those, you're going to be posting once. You're going to be looking at your classmates' posts and then responding, replying. So, for instance, if we're doing the first style of forum, where you describe a situation you have experienced that's relevant to the code, you will listen to others and comment, and you could ask follow-up, or you could say, oh, I experienced a situation similar to this and I handled it this way, or anything like that, where you're adding additional information to their post. If we're doing the second style of forum discussion, where we're creating a short video summary, you need to give feedback to others on their training videos. So you could say, oh, I really like how you described this and use this metaphor this way, or, you know, that could be confusing to some people because what about this and this and this? So you're going to be giving feedback to each other. And it's my understanding that this is a format that's familiar to you in your courses. So I'm hoping that it'll be smooth for you guys and easy, and you'll be able to hit the ground running with those forums. Assessments, we have quizzes. We're going to have 4 of them, and we're going to have 1 of them over each of those code components. So 1 over 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0. So 4 total. They're going to be straightforward. Asking you to summarize components of the code and to answer some true-false statements of, is this statement true according to code 3.0, for example. I don't foresee those being difficult for you all, but you will need to be familiar with that section of the code prior to taking the quiz. Finally, our final exam or final project will involve kind of putting everything you know together and creating a short video that you can actually take and use in your organization to train staff on the basics of the BACB ethical code. So think about it as, what if you have somebody coming in to replace you or the next practicum student, what do you want to sit them down and watch that you feel like will cover the basics of the code? I think this is going to be doing two things. One, it's going to help you synthesize and summarize everything you've learned in the course. And it's also going to familiarize you with this style of training. So, as you know, sitting and taking an online course, this method of instruction is the way of the future. The more you get comfortable recording yourself and using the technology to impart information using this digital media is going to serve you well in your career. So I know it's not everybody's favorite thing, and I can attest to that personally. This is a learning experience for me, but I feel like you'll have a heads up if you complete this assignment. Okay. Overall, what I hope you get out of this course is I want you to be fluent in discussing these ethical situations. Fluency doesn't mean you're going to memorize the code, and I don't think that's necessary or necessarily that helpful. You need to be very familiar with it so you know where to look in the code if you have a situation. You know, you don't have to read through the whole thing, but you know, oh, this is covered in code 4.0. And also, fluency doesn't mean that, again, that you're memorizing and saying it verbatim. Fluency means you're able to discuss the code in different registers for different kinds of people. So if you're consulting with another BCBA, you can discuss it fluently using more of the behavioral terminology. But then you can easily switch to a parent or a professional in another field and discuss it just as fluently with a completely different set of terms and level of language. So we're going to do this by trying to think of how to behaviorally conceptualize what I'm doing in the skill acquisition process for you, and I'm hoping to improve your interverbal repertoire using repetition and feedback. So you guys having conversations back and forth in the forums is hopefully going to shape and improve your interverbal repertoire on this topic. So we're going to also, with the quizzes, for example, this is going to reinforce the use of the ethical code as a reference source so that you are more familiar with it and you will be reinforced in terms of a higher quiz grade if you correctly reference the ethical code. And also, when you complete this, you actually have a permanent product that you can use and show others that, look, I do know the ethical code. And when you apply for a job, you say, actually, I have a training on ethics. And believe me, any employer that's worth being employed by will value your knowledge in ethics and will value that you put an emphasis on ethics. And overall, this is a reflection on my values and my just kind of approach is I do put an emphasis on efficiency. So I am not going to devote a lot of time to trying to be entertaining and funny. Now, I don't want to come off as overly dry, but if I'm going to be honest, if I try too hard to be entertaining or funny with these lectures and incorporating some more humorous YouTube clips and stuff like that, I would probably fall short. One of the major limits of online instruction is that I don't get to respond to your nonverbal cues and feedback. So I can't tell right now if you're nodding off to sleep and I need to pick it up and be more funny, or if you're very engaged and writing as fast as you can and I need to slow down. I don't get those cues and those feedbacks, which is what we normally adjust our conversation style or presentation style to. So I would probably be way off if I was trying to incorporate too much humor. So I think for the purpose of valuing your time, I'm going to, because I know you're very busy, you're studying for your test, you've got other academic obligations, and of course you're in your practicum. I'm going to strive to impart the information as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So again, it may result as me coming off a little overly serious, and I think there's worse things to be because I am pretty serious about ethics. Um, some of the more academic topics you have taken over your entire educational course, um, while I'm not saying they're not important, they don't have as direct of an impact on your ability to help people in the future and to save your career in the future. So, my hope is that you're really going to use the information you gain in this course immediately in your practicum site, but also in your career. And just even if for just a handful of situations, what you've learned in this course influences how you deal with the case, that has very real impacts on people's lives. So I do take it pretty seriously. And again, you're busy people, I'm a busy person, so I'll strive to use our time efficiently. I'm not going to give you any busy work, any readings. Everything you do in this course is related directly to course objectives. I encourage you to review the course objective table, which is located at the very top of the course page on Moodle. And what this does, and although this wasn't my idea, this is something that is indirectly mandated through the university in our Quality Matters rubric, is to ensure that everything that I make you do, every resource I give you, every assignment you do, and every assessment that you do is linked and has a purpose. What do I want you to be able to do at the end of this course? And everything I give you and make you do has to be directly related to those student outcomes. So that was a great exercise for me, and I think it's going to really help this course be streamlined, because if I'm making you do it, it's not going to be something that's frivolous and just think that, oh, this might be interesting. No, it really needs to be linked to those objectives. Now, you're probably wondering, well, I just talked about myself for 10 minutes and that's not necessarily directly related, but I do think, again, that having some background information, because we lack that in-person connection, will hopefully make the rest of the course more engaging and relevant. Yeah, and again, the end product is not going to be just something that hopefully just sits on your computer or in some file for ages, but is something that you're able to actually pull out and use without any further modifications. Okay, so what is ethics? I needed to take a few steps at the back at the beginning of this and say, what does the word mean in its most general sense? Well, it's a set of moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. Pretty straightforward. So it is principles that tell you how you should do something. Okay? It's also the branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles, but that is more in the philosophical realm rather than the in practice. So ethics and behavior analysis, you've probably gone through in a past course the history of ethics and behavior analysis and how those came out of Florida and some tragic cases there. Really what we just need to know right now is that Bailey and Birch are really the preeminent experts in the field of ethics for behavior analysis. Their book that I showed you just moments ago, Ethics for Behavior Analysts, is in its third edition, and it is the go-to book for this topic. Outside of the white book, it is the one book that you need to know inside and out for passing your exam. So, several chapters of the book are required reading for this course, including for this week. And it's a combination of case studies and a conceptual overview of how to approach ethics in the field. So this week we're reading chapters 3 and 4, both of which are very short, brief chapters, and we're going to summarize those next. So chapter 3 in Ethics for Behavior Analysts goes into a metaphor for ethics they call ethics in whitewater rafting. It's not as exciting as it sounds, but it is a very useful framework for ranking the complexity and difficulty of ethical situations. So the basis of this metaphor is that those who do whitewater rafting use a classification system to guide paddlers and rafters as to whether or not they have the skills necessary to successfully navigate a section of river. So it's just a classification system so that it's not up to every individual who comes up to it to say, can I do this or not? It's given a rating, and they've determined in advance whether or not they have the qualifications necessary for that rating. I'm not a whitewater rafter. I do have some skiing experience, so to me it's a little more helpful to think of it as the classification for ski runs. So you've got the bunny slopes, the blues and black diamonds and double black diamonds, etc. So that way you don't have to come to every hill, look down, and try to rank it yourself and figure out if you have it. You go up to it, you see what somebody else has ranked it, and you know, like, am I the level of skier who can do this or not? And really helps to improve safety by helping people to make decisions as to whether or not they're able to do that or not. So Bailey and Birch adapted this system to rank ethical situation in terms of their complexity and risk for negative outcomes. So those are the kind of two different variables that go into the level of ranking. So they also take that a further and say, for this classification of ethical situation, you need this level of certification and experience to successfully navigate the situation. I think this is very helpful, and it takes some of the guessing out of it. So when you're able to point to Bailey and Birch's classification system, it's going to give you the ability to show that to a supervisor and say, see, I'm not just saying that I don't feel comfortable with this. Our ethical, these experts in the field of ethics recommend that you need more training and certification than I have to be able to handle this situation. So here is just a summary of this. You'll find this in chapter 3. They have 6 levels of complexity, which is the left-hand column. So it ranks it as far as how much of a violation is here. Is it minor, moderate, serious? What is the probability of harm? From no harm to harm is imminent. And then, are the solution in your authority is the solution and the steps needed for the solution within your authority? So either yes, it's in your authority for lesson 1, or no, it's not in your authority and it takes multiple steps. To the next column, serious office or agency conflicts. So is there a conflict or is there not? Is there some conflict, serious conflict? Is there legal issues? And then what is the risk to you as a BCBA? Is there no risk to your licensure and certification? Is there some risk or is there serious risk? And all of those variables go into how you classify an individual situation. So once you know what level the situation is, you can refer to this following table, and that will tell you what level you need. So BCBADs with several years experience can deal with any situation. Now, if you're a BCABA, then really if it's above level 1, then you should get a BCBA to help you. And, even if you're a BCBA, fully certified with experience, if it's a level 5 or 6, you need to consult with a doctoral level BCBA. So this is a nice way to say, kind of as a check, if you're not feeling comfortable with it, really rank it and then see, like, am I the right person to be able to deal with this or not? And again, this is something that you can show to your employer or the family or whomever. So you're not just saying, I just don't want to do this. It's, I do not have the qualifications which are required for this level of a situation. Okay, so once we've done that, it's time to get to work. So once you've determined that you do have sufficient qualifications to deal with an ethical situation in a case, then we start to work on it using the 7-step model, which helps to break down these ethical situations. Okay, so this is in chapter 4 of the Bailey and Birch, and I'm just going to kind of summarize these steps. So first of all, is this issue covered by the ethical code? It probably is, at least indirectly, and you want to then revisit and study those sections of the ethical code in some detail to familiarize yourself. The next step is identify the players in the case. So who is everybody who's a stakeholder? Obviously the client comes first. You are there. Your employer, the family, your supervisor if you have one, everybody who is, as I said, a stakeholder in that. If there's a different funding agency, another agency involved, line all those people out and what their involvement is. So first, then you want to have plan A, plan B, maybe even plan C or D. So what is the best possible outcome for this? That would be your plan A, but you need to have backups. And I'm really glad that Bailey and Birch have this more realistic approach, because they're not saying that just develop the absolute best outcome, and if that doesn't happen, walk away. They're more realistic than that. They realize that the first solution that you develop may not work, and you need a plan B. Now, all of your contingency plans should result in, an ethical outcome, but there's more than one way to get there, and I like that realistic approach. So for each contingency plan, how much skills and clout do you need for each one? Probably for the plan A, where is what you really hope to happen and what you're going to try for first, is going to require more skills and clout. We're going to talk about skills and clout later, but those are basically your soft skills, your influence and communication ability and authority within, in dealing with those different players. So think about, like, is this really going to take some talking to my employer about this? What skills and clout do you need to improve on and really focus on in order to get the most desirable outcome? And I like that step 4, because it recognizes that it's really about your level of skill in those, being able to convince others, the other players, that this needs to happen. And that whether or not you're able to convince them is based on how good you are at communicating that and how much respect they have for you and the level of trust. So it's not, if you're not able to get contingency A, that first plan, and it falls through and you're not able to make it, it's not because the rest of the team is necessarily unethical. It's that you were not able to convince them of that. And I like that it puts the responsibility back on us and that we need to do really hone our skills and clout to be able to convince others of what's ethical. That's our responsibility. So then we're going to analyze the risk to each players in the case, including ourselves, the client, and the rest of the stakeholders. And then 6 is we're going to follow through. We're going to try to start with that first plan, work on it, and move along until we get it resolved as ethically as possible. And then 7, we're going to keep detailed notes and evaluate whether it was handled optimally. And this is going to be helpful for you in growing for future cases. So if you learned some hard lessons from trying to get plan A through, you need to really reflect and evaluate, what did you do right, what did you do wrong, what can you do differently next time. So I do want to talk some more about skills and clout, because I don't know that we'll have as much time to talk about that as time goes on in the course. But I like this because it emphasizes that just your knowledge of ABA, principles in research, and your knowledge of ethics is not enough to make you successful. So you could get every single question right on your certification test and get a 4.0 in all of your coursework, and even have a doctoral level certification, but that is not enough to make you a truly successful behavior analyst. You do need that, but that alone is not enough. So the only optional text, or I think we might use the term recommended text, is 25 Essential Skills for the Practicing Behavior Analyst, also by Bailey and Birch. If you are not familiar with this, I'm not going to refer to it directly or have anything specifically from that text on any of the assessments, but you should buy and read that book. Again, it's only recommended for this course, but it is so important to your success in the field because it talks about those soft skills. I know a lot of really brilliant teachers and administrators in the world of education and developmental disabilities, but if you don't have those soft skills of organization, communication, and planning, you might know the right things to do, but if you can't convince other people of that and communicate it effectively, it's not going to happen and you're not going to be effective. So I know that there will be many times in your career when you are factually correct and ethically compliant. So you're going to be sitting in a meeting with 5 to 10 other professionals and family members and clients around a table. A topic will come up. What should we do about XYZ? And you will have your thoughts and your ideas and your plans, and because you're going to come out of this with the certification, it's probably going to be based in science, and it will probably be what's best for the client. But if you can't work with that team and communicate your perspective, then the client's not going to benefit. And we're not going to be able to take that course. Then it doesn't do any good that you have that information if you're not able to convince and persuade others of that, about that knowledge. So, every time that you were in that situation where you had a specific perspective and you had a plan for a client, and the rest of the team members had a different one, and they chose, let's say, there's some problem behavior and parents are on board with sensory integration, and so's the OT and PT and speech therapist and the funding agency, and you're outnumbered. If you terminated services for each of those times when you feel like there's an ethical impasse in your career, then you're going to have a hard time finding people to give services to, because this happens all the time. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't terminate services when some of those situations happen. but you have to be skilled at maneuvering these team problem solving situations and using your interpersonal skills, such as effective communication and navigating the administrative hierarchy and gaining clout. You have to get better at those, because if you just say, we need to do this, they say no, you terminate services because you don't think that they're working ethically, that's not going to be beneficial to clients. You have to really persuade and sell your perspective, and that's not something that's covered in your in your behavior analytic coursework. You're learning what is right, not how to convince others it's right. So I don't think you can overestimate the importance of skills and clout, soft skills. So those 25 essential skills for the practicing behavior analyst, while it may not be the most important book to get you certified, once you're out there and you have that solid foundational knowledge of the field, that is what's going to take you to the next level and get you to be an actual well-respected and effective behavior analyst. So it's great that you're going to come out of this knowing all of our ethical code, but most BCBAs out there, or at least, many, if not most, work in settings where they are partnering with non-BCBAs to provide services. I, until this year, have never worked with another BCBA. I've always been the lone BCBA in my organization agency. So this makes it really challenging if nobody else cares, to be quite honest, about our ethical code, because they probably have their own ethical code that they care about. They're not going to ask you, oh, does this, is this relevant to your ethical code, or does this comply with your code of ethics? You're not going to get that question. You are going to have to alone advocate for this. So one way that's a surefire way not to work is to, every time something like this comes up, like a sensory diet or writing a behavior plan hastily or not having graph data, if you pull out the ethical code and quote it and saying, this is shall never write a behavior plan without first conducting a functional assessment, you will quickly be tuned out by the team and get sidelined. That is not an effective way to go about it. You might be right, again, but being right doesn't mean that it's going to get results. So you do need to educate your colleagues about our profession and our code, but you need to be doing it with finesse. So you need to gain clout and respect before you just expect everybody to follow your code. And for people to understand that you're going to be that strict on following your code. I think we're fortunate as a field that we really do put a lot of emphasis on our ethical code. I mean, I don't hear, being that I work with a lot of professionals in other fields, psychologists, occupational therapists, speech language therapists, and so on and so forth, they have their own ethical codes. I don't know that they're as prominent in their fields as they are in our field. And I say that because I don't hear reference to them as much, and I do reference our code quite often. So I'm not saying that this means you should tolerate any violations of the code, but you need to use some finesse when dealing with more minor ethical situations, because if you pull out the code every time there's a minor ethical situation, then they're going to tune you out when it's a really more serious violation that you really need to refer back to that code. So again, it's not about being right, at least not completely about being right. Like, you can always step away, but if you want to influence other professionals into providing more effective and ethical treatment for an individual, then you need to gain the respect and the trust and the professional relationships through good communication skills. No easy answers, but prevention is really the key to this. So how can we prevent these ethical dilemmas? One of the most important ways is, before you take a job, you need to let them know that if anything comes up that's in violation of this code, I am going to stand up for it. if you bring that up in the hiring process when interviewing and applying, and they agree to it, then there should be no surprises when you do say, later on in the course of employment, say, oh, look, this is not okay. This is in violation of the code. They have no reason to shrug that off because you told them point blank in the hiring that this is a qualification for my employment. And just making sure that they know that it's not just something that, oh, this is how I like to do things. This is how you are mandated to do things, and you can lose your certification and license if you don't. So share the code with them, explain it to them. You know, if you don't get hired because you are so firm about the code, then that's good because you just avoided getting employed by a unethical employer, or you just, if you would have been hired by them and then there was an ethical situation, then obviously they wouldn't have complied with your request to approach it more ethically, because if they're not going to hire you because you're ethical, then they're probably not going to go out of their way to, approach things in an ethical way. So, but if they do agree to hire you and most likely they're going to be impressed by your adherence to the ethical code, it'll be much easier for you to hold your ground once you're employed because you were very upfront about it. Okay, well, that is all I have for you this week. Thank you so much for staying with me. Please feel free to contact me anytime by email with any questions. My phone number is also posted on the course website. I have office hours. Feel free to call me anytime there. You can call outside of those. I just may or may not be available. I'm going to be adding course lectures at least a week or 2 weeks in advance. So keep an eye out for those. And I look forward to seeing your first forum discussions this week. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.